Not his name was known in Britain, but not really in connection with the Kindertransports at all. And I was in England, this is sort of a side, last year for a memorial for Sir Nicholas Winton, and we were going for it was everything was over, and friends and I were going for a walk in Hyde Park in London, and there was a bust of George Lansbury. I had never seen a picture. I only knew the name. My mother remembered the name, that he had given a talk, but I never knew what he. And I think he is was the father of Angela Lansbury, who is a famous actress. So that's just so. My mother heard him speak, and my mother could speak English, so she understood. And he was very pessimistic about Hitler, and because most people didn't believe that he was as wicked and as bad as he seemed, and that he was going to destroy whole nations, that really people didn't believe. Maybe a few did, but most didn't. Churchill was very perspicacious, but he wasn't even prime minister yet at that time. So my mother heard him speak, and then his speech was published in the newspaper, the daily newspaper. So she decided she would write to him. And she wrote to Mr. Lansbury, care of the Houses of Parliament, London. And people said, and she told her friends, saying, she sent a little picture of me and said in the letter that we were a small Jewish family. We were very liberal, not very religious. And her question was to Mr. Lansbury whether there was any way he could help to get me to England, just the little girl, that I was the only child, and all my mother's friends laughed at her. Said, what would you think? Houses of Parliament, they're going to all jump and respond to your letter? And she said, well, you know, so what? So they won't respond. But they did. 5 days later, they got a letter, my parents, from Mr. Lansbury's secretary, and she introduced herself. And she said that all she said was that they got the letter and they would do whatever they could to help to get my mother's little girl to England safely. And so then my parents realized that this was real, and they decided they weren't sending me. And they sat down to write a letter, and before they could even write the letter, just saying thank you, we've changed our minds, they got a letter again just 5 days later, very quickly, from a family called the Daniels family, and they were from Manchester, near Manchester, and they said they would take care of my parents' little girl as if she were their own. And they had a little boy who was 2.5 years younger than me, and they said they had a kitten and they had a little house in the outskirts of Manchester, in the suburbs, and they would be willing to help. So my parents were quite shocked. So I knew about this, and that was like March or maybe April. So and I didn't leave till the end of July. So I had about 2-3 months to think about this. My mother made me start learning English. Not very long, 2 months, 3 months, and I had a very nice young teacher who had a dog. Then later she was arrested. Well, they all were. Everybody was arrested who was Jewish, and she sent me, and I still have to this. She sent me a letter from the dog, like written as if the dog had written the letter when I was already in England, and saying he couldn't be with his mistress anymore, and he missed her and he missed me. That was very sad. I mean, obviously she was writing the letter, but it was sweet, and I still have it. So I started learning English, learned for maybe 2 months or 3 before I left, so twice a week or 3 times a week with a cousin. He was older than me, a boy, so there were 2 of us having these English lessons. Well, and my mother started buying clothes, and Sir Nicholas, whose name we didn't know, but my mother always called it the committee. That's what the signatures were, British Committee for Children from Prague or something like that. The committee gave all these instructions, what you were supposed to take, 2 suitcases, what size they were to be and what weight they, and when we were to show up, and I was put in the transport that was to leave Prague Central Station. The station, actually, it's quite interesting. The Czechoslovak Republic was only established in 1918 after World War I, and the first president of the Republic was a friend of Woodrow Wilson's. So, and he studied in this country, the first Czech president, and he married an American woman and took her name as his middle name. Her name was Charlotte Garrick, so his name then was Thomas, first name Garrick. Masaryk was his third name, his surname, like Smith or Jones. And so everybody called him TGM, was his abbreviation. Anyway, so because he was a friend of Woodrow Wilson's, and Woodrow Wilson was very instrumental in the establishment of the country, the big main railway station in Prague was called the Wilson Station, and still is. It's sort of, I like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we heard from the British Committee, which is what he called himself, when he had this special meeting with himself and appointed himself the head of all this. We got a lot of these letters, and I was put into the transport which was to leave Prague Wilson Station at midnight. It said on July 31st, 1939. So we left after midnight, so it was like August 1. It was the last transport to arrive in Britain safely. And there were 68 of us on that transport. And you were asking what did I remember? Well, I knew about that I was going, and my parents were, I am very, very grateful to my parents, because they were honest and they told me everything. And there were children on that transport who thought they were going to camp. Maybe they were going to be housed in a camp, but they thought it was vacation. It was July, August, vacation, no school. They were all excited. They were going to go to the ocean, which was then the parents, many. Brini, do you mind?